So welcome to our webinar on creating a container for good work as coaches. I'm Damien Wamfor. I'm the program leader of our diploma in transformational coaching, and it's great to be joined by my colleague and dear friend Monica Ross for this session today. And just before I introduce Monica, I just wanted to start this session just with some housekeeping, which I hope will support your learning for this session. First being, it's always great to close down any other applications because we often find that they can impact transmission speed. And secondly, I'd really encourage you to have a pen and paper handy. We really want to create a learning session for you today as a coach. So just encouraging you to take notes just to support your learning as we go through the session. So the session today will be, up to 45 minutes. We will be having a dialogue around this topic in terms of our work as coaches, which we really hope will bring value to your practice and your development as a coach. So now I'd just like to introduce Monica. So Monica is an embodied leadership coach and supervisor. She's one of the core faculty members of our diploma in transformational coaching. So for those of you that are coming through our program, you'll connect with Monica both in terms of your supervision, but then also Monica and I lead the embodied coaching module, which takes place towards the end of the first year. So you'll get to know Monica really well over that time, I'm sure. So in terms of Monica's work as a coach and a supervisor, she brings, and I think, real expertise in terms of an energetic and systemic focus. And she's passionate about bringing I suppose empowerment and impact, I'd say, in terms of her work through embodiment. And she has a particular focus in terms of, the alignment of the three centers in terms of the head and the heart and the gut. So I'm sure I could go on some more in terms of what I believe Monica brings, but Monica, hopefully that gives us a good sense to start the session. And I suppose my first invitation to you may be, I know often when you're working with groups and individuals, you use a practice and exercise to enable people to bring in to come into presence in before the session starts, but also to come in contact with themselves. So how would it be to do that for this session?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted. Yeah, I am passionate about really, if you think about it, before any session with clients or even before this webinar, we've all come from different places. And you and I, Damien, and all of those who are listening in, you will have been in other spaces and other conversations before this. So this is an exercise I call collecting self. And it's a way of connecting with yourself, coming into alignment, and then connecting with whoever you're going to be working with so that you can do good work together. So I'm going to invite you to first kind of move forward a little bit on your seat so that you make good contact between your feet and the ground, and it makes a stable base. And you might find that when you press on your sitting bones, as they're called, the bones at the bottom of your torso, that you become more upright. And sometimes people look much more impactful immediately. In fact, I can see Damien already is looking much more upright. Because it actually, your posture changes the hormones in your body. So just take a moment to connect in with yourself, feel your feet on the ground, feel your body and the weight on the seat. And as we begin to collect ourselves, I'm going to invite you first to connect in with your head. And the head is a part of us that we're all very familiar with. It's always very busy. So just allow your head to become still. Invite it in just as it is. And for this session, so that you can get full benefit, just allow yourself to become still and allow your mind to become almost like the night sky. Really clear, peaceful, still, And maybe you'll get some insights like stars twinkling, the sense of, wow, I knew that, or wow, that's new. Just get that sense of the mind coming present, being an instrument of reception, receiving insights. And now let's move down to the heart. And the heart is a very powerful instrument. It has its own electromagnetic field, and it's a center of intelligence in its own right. And actually, some people think the heart can be broken, but it's actually a very strong part of the body. So fill your heart, just connect in and get a sense of filling your heart with unconditional acceptance for yourself right now. It doesn't matter what conversations you've been in, what judgments you might have made about yourself for not getting up early enough or whatever. Just appreciate yourself. Allow yourself to know you're doing the best you can, and others are too. And imagine that your heart is like your biggest favorite piece of sea or water, a lake maybe. Just connect with that sense of a large mass of water, so deep, so containing. And even if it's choppy on the top, when you go down deep, there's always this stillness, this peacefulness, and this richness abounding in all sorts of fish and crustaceans and life. It's abundant. So allow your heart and the sense of that peacefulness and abundance to be with you in this call. And now we move down to what's called in leadership embodiment our center, but it's also our gut. It's the hara in Japanese. And it's, if you think of a martial artist, they hunker down and they become very solid. Sometimes I think of the shape of an anvil. And just to feel that solidity, that sense of being planted and rooted. But also it's your place of power and confidence. So as we connect with this, just remember, bring to mind moments of power and confidence that you've experienced in your work as a coach. Connect in with those moments when you've really served well, when you've really been fully yourself. And now, for a moment, just allow those three centers to become aligned. It's almost like they begin to speak to each other. And as you do that, just allow an intention for this session. As these, your heart, your head, your gut, as they communicate, just allow them to offer you an intention that you can bring into this space. Maybe even an intention that you carry with you throughout the day. And lastly, I'm going to invite you, when you've aligned, to connect your energy, to extend your energy out, to fill the four corners of the space that you're in, whether it's a small office or a big office. With your sense of your imagination, allow your body to send out that energy so that you take up your full space. And let's also include each other. We can extend our energy even across continents. So I'm including Damien and I'm including all of you. And I'm going to invite you to include Damien and myself and all those listening, but also all the people you'll encounter today, all the people you've already encountered. And to bring in a benevolent message of, we are all one. We are all okay. And we are in this together. We'll just leave out a long, slow exhale. letting go of anything you don't need in this space. And now, Damien, when you feel ready, it's back to you. What do you notice?
Yeah, so I mean, I noticed, I know you commented on it, but as soon as I changed my posture, I noticed a sense of already a sense of greater presence, actually. Um, you know, my thoughts about this session and where the conversation is likely to go, I mean, they just dropped away, and I started to notice my sense of contact, um, and then as we went through the exercise, yeah, I was really struck by that sort of the center, the hara, you know, that sense of strength when I connected to that place in my body. I felt really connected, really grounded, um, and a real sense of openness, actually,
Mm.
compared to when I first connected to my head. So there was that sort of chattering going on, you know.
Yeah, the head can be very busy, and
Mm.
it's purposeful, but
Mm.
um, sometimes we could actually get great insights when we calm the head because it can listen to the heart and gut. And
Mm.
those messages sometimes aren't heard if we're too busy scratching our heads and thinking, what am I going to do about this?
Mm.
So when we come into a place of presence, we can actually access the wisdom that's already available.
Mm. Yeah, no, lovely, Monica. And I suppose it's just a sense of, you know, I know we're going to go into this conversation about a container, but I suppose that's just sparked a thought around, with your inclusion of, you know, the people that they're going to meet. Well, we're going to meet later in the day. Just a sense of, you know, the piece around, I suppose, uh, yeah, acknowledging the end of a coaching program, you know, or end of a session, and actually having an exercise or a practice that I can do that can enable me to be present for the next parts of my day as well. So
Mm,
I was just struck by that
mm.
in terms of that inclusion piece. Mm.
Yeah, because we carry energy from one space to the next. And so
Yeah.
it's good to acknowledge that and to come into full presence in the space you're in.
Mm. And I suppose with that in mind, um, you know, we may have people that are now training with us as coaches, you know, new to coaching, or we may have people listening who have been coaching for a long time. But so the first question I think that everybody's going to be asking is, you know, why are we talking about this? Why are we talking about creating a container?
Very good question.
Mm.
I'm just noticing that one of my eyes is beginning to water for some reason. There's something in the air. But
Mm.
so container sounds like a funny word to use.
Mm.
It's maybe not the best word, but I suppose, when I think of container, I there's an image that I bring often when I'm working in groups, which is a golden chalice. It's like a golden cup. And it comes from the idea of a temenos or a crucible, a container where um, sacred things are held or where very precious things are held. And so I see the coaching space and the supervision space as a really sacred space where we're working with, very precious aspects of a client and their life and their work. And so it's important to find a way to protect and hold that space and hold the client so that they can come fully in and allow themselves to really meet themselves and to hear themselves in a way they don't normally get an opportunity to do, and to be respected and listened to with such depth that that they can access the things that they don't normally hear from themselves.
Mm.
So for me, maybe the word container isn't a beautiful word, but when I think of the image that I have of that golden container, that says it all for me.
Mm. Yeah, I suppose what resonates with me is this piece around, you know, often, um, you know, new coaches get very much focused on the process and, you know, contracting, and they see, you know, the importance of that, and we're doing contracting. But I suppose what's just resonated in me is that piece around, the space that we're holding, the space that we're creating for the coachee. And so, yeah, just the importance of that, I suppose, is what I'm noticing as you last spoke. So perhaps if it's okay, Monica, talk a bit about the container itself, about what you mean in terms of creating that sort of sacred chalice. What sort of thoughts come to mind?
Well, actually, what you were sort of beginning to speak about there, Damien, the contracting is a really important part, and the relational piece. It is
Mm.
a relationship between two human beings or more if it's a group.
Yeah.
And as human beings, we are very connected. Our limbic system, if you think of neuroscience, that we are constantly exchanging information to our limbic system that we're not even aware of, and energetically we're reading each other's energy. So it's really important to take care of our state as we connect with somebody, and as we prepare the space to be with them, whether that's face to face or whether it's virtually as we're doing today.
Mm-mm.
And I some years ago I created something related to the seven-eyed model, which is a model used in supervision. And I wrote a quotation which was really important to me, and I continually quote it to others, which is the very the when somebody connects for the first time with a client, however that is, by email, by phone, face to face, the very first contact has the seeds of the whole relationship.
Mm.
And it's fascinating when you meet somebody for the first time, and I've seen this borne out so many times, that the quality of that first connection and the information you pick up actually happens again and again in the relationship. So even if there's throwaway comment that the client makes, that actually will come back as a thread right through the relationship. Sometimes they might say something that, with a kind of a laugh and kind of discount something, but actually it can be really important. And if we don't pay attention and if we're not really listening, we will miss it in that moment and it will come back and may actually get in the way later on. So
Mm.
it's about really, you know, cultivating that space to begin with. And when we think of the container, quite often on coaching programs beginning, we're told about making sure that we work in a space that's boundaried. Um, you don't necessarily go into a coffee shop where there are loads of people.
Mm.
Mind you, some people like that kind of environment, but
Mm-mm.
that we take care that it's confidential and that the person is, you know, feeling that they can speak without having to watch themselves. Also, that the environment is warm enough, comfortable enough. Sometimes people like to walk out in the open air, go for
Mm.
walks, and that's as long as it's contained and well held.
Mm.
That's one aspect. Or when we're working virtually, that we make sure there are noises in the background, which is why we're wearing our headsets.
Yeah.
And that if you're in an organization, because I've seen this so many times when I'm working as a supervisor, if you have to book rooms sometimes in the organization, people can walk in unexpectedly or knock at the door, their heads will appear, and that can get in the way of your presence. So that's kind of one aspect that we're probably familiar with, and the other is, you know, making sure that we contain it with the confidentiality and that we make agreements around who receives feedback and how it's received or whether it's received. But there are many more aspects that are often more subtle and invisible that
Mm.
we need to take care of also.
Mm. And so just say a bit more about some of those sort of subtle aspects, Monica, if that's okay.
Well, one of them, and I'm sure this is often mentioned, it's becoming more and more mentioned, I suppose, is the whole idea of presence, as we've just done today,
Mm.
making sure that you arrive, whether it's face to face or on a call, that
Mm.
you almost prepare yourself before you arrive on the call, so that
Yeah.
you don't fall in from one meeting and start having a conversation, that you really create a respectful space for yourself first, so that you're in a good space, and then to hold the space for the person you're going to be working with. And the reason that I invite everybody to come into presence is I'm so aware that while I might have prepared myself to come into presence and I'm sitting here all zen, the person who's coming on, and quite often with groups, people will be arriving from very rushed mornings, pressurized situations, and for them to get the most out of the space, I really feel it's important to invite them to just breathe and land, and to allow themselves to just let go for a while of whatever it was that they were carrying or whatever they're about to go into, and just have this space fully. So that's one aspect, my state and the client's state, that we hold and take care of both of those. And other aspects, in terms of the relational aspects, that, it's important that we're aware that the client can also be affected by, the organization that they're in and the systemic influences there, which are sometimes invisible. It's good also if we know our own base state, if we're aware of how we are normally, and normally when we're in a good place or when we're a bit jangled, so that we can, if something big has happened in your life before you go on a call, that you manage your own energy around it and that you find a way to leave it outside until you can, finish the session and go back and handle whatever it is. Sometimes I will invite, I always invite people to say how they're arriving on a call. And some people will come on and say, oh, yeah, fine. And then I ask them if there's anything you need to leave out of, leave behind you just for the moment. If there was anything that happened to you earlier that might be interfering, let's just take a moment to acknowledge that to yourself and trust that you will look after it outside, so that you can be present here. So these are maybe very simple things. They don't take much time, but it's important to not pretend you're feeling wonderful if something has happened. So acknowledge and let go for the time being. So that's one aspect. Yeah, I'll hand back to you just to see if anything else has come up for you.
Yeah, and I suppose so. Just to go back a short while in terms of what you were saying about that first contact, I'm mindful of some supervisory conversations I've been having recently around the theme, around that, in terms of perhaps the first contact has been with, HR director or the person's manager who's painted a certain picture of the coachee, the client. And so then as a coach, how can I still create that container where I meet them as a human being rather than seeing them as a problem already,
I'm smiling because you've read my mind. That is
Okay. Yeah.
where I'm going to go to next.
Oh, okay.
The stance of the coach and their intention for the client and for the work is really important. And, I suppose as coaches gain more experience, if they notice that, HR or others are kind of asking questions that really aren't useful for the work, that they find a way to actually handle those conversations differently so it doesn't interfere, and they request that people don't give them information. But it still happens, and especially for internal coaches, you will have information about people whether you like it or not. The grapevine will work whether your ears are open or closed. And so it's really important that you come to a place of almost not knowing. And in dialogue, there's a lovely phrase about suspending judgment. So a question that I ask myself sometimes is, what if what I think I know or what somebody has told me is just a perspective, and that actually who I'm going to meet, and this is proven true so many times, that can I meet this person from a place of not knowing them at all and
mm,
just allowing them to come in and show themselves to me.
mm,
And when I change my energy towards the person, they come in as the person they are, because energetically they pick up my intention and my permission for them to be themselves. And it's fascinating how the story that's been created about them is often, there may be bits of it that have some relevance, but actually there will be the client side of the story, and there will be another truth that enters. So there's my truth, there's their truth, there's the organizational truth, and we have to hold the space for what can emerge. And you know, the very fact that we're working with somebody means that there's, in theory, you language, that something wants to emerge for that person.
mm,
And our job is to hold as neutral and as safe a space as we can, while offering them challenge in agreement with themselves,
mm,
so that that can emerge.
mm,
So yeah, that would be my response: the stance and
mm.
the intention and the letting go of prior knowledge.
Mm. Yeah, and that whole piece you spoke about earlier in terms of knowing themselves, because that sort of sense of, is that causing them to lean in or to lean out, in terms of the potential of the relationship. Yeah, and I like the piece around intention, and that sort of, I suppose a phrase that I often use in our training is, energy follows focus. So just being aware of what your intention is as you're meeting that person as well. Yeah.
And actually, that's a good point, Damien, because it brings me to,
Mm.
sometimes there are prior relationships, especially if people work in organizations, or
Mm.
when coaches are starting out, they're looking for their first clients, and they will often go to people that they've worked with before, or that they know as friends, and
Yeah.
even though, on the coaching program, they might be told to avoid dual relationships,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, sometimes people will offer themselves as clients because they want to see the person succeed as a coach.
Mm.
And I think in those moments, it's really important as a coach. And I find myself often, exploring with a coach the very first seeds of the relationship, in terms of how did that person become your client?
Yeah.
Because quite often the coach will be really wanting to serve the person, and will be working very hard to do a good job, and
Mm.
will see the potential of the person, and will have a desire to support them to achieve that. And on the client's part, the client will want to be a good client, and will want to help the coach to do a good job. But
Mm.
sometimes those desires can get in the way. They can
Mm.
actually bring in vulnerability. They can
Mm.
cause people to kind of hold back on speaking their truth,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Mm.
So, it's one of the things to be aware of, that, what am I believing about this person, or what am I hoping for this person
Mm.
that I haven't even admitted to myself?
Mm. Yeah, and I think with that in mind, I think it's a really useful point, Monica, in terms of, and so therefore as a coach, really being conscious of, I suppose, that sort of psychological contracting around my expectations of you. Yes, you may be somebody that I know well and who's volunteered for the coaching, but what do I expect from you in terms of, for you to get the most out of this relationship? And sort of holding those in terms of like that first contact, so there is sort of clear expectation. Yeah.
And I think it's really important, that can happen even if the client is new and you've never met them before, but it's
Yeah.
even stronger when
Mm.
there's some sort of prior relationship,
Mm.
whatever form that took and however long it was. And
Mm.
quite often I've noticed as a supervisor that for example, um, somebody might find themselves coaching an ex-boss. I've seen that several times. And then you
Mm.
have a hierarchy situation as well, which can invite in something called deference,
Yeah.
where the coach is afraid to challenge and doesn't want to push too hard. Or they might go over the top and push because they think that that's what the person needs. And so to have a really honest and um, a kind of transparent conversation at the beginning around, so what do I think I know about you already that might actually get in the way? And what am
Mm,
I expecting of you? You know, I know you in this role for several years, and this is how you seem to do, and this is what you always do for me.
mm,
And, you know, as coach, how are you going to be the same person? And for the coach to actually recognize that coaching is a different kind of conversation to
mm,
the ones they might have had previously. And there is, you know, there are structures that you hold. So the coach is the kind of expert on the coaching process, but the client is the expert on themselves.
yeah.
And so that the coach can do a good job in holding that space
Mm,
and creating the best conditions for the client to flourish.
mm. And and you know, again, your word around sort of protecting the sort of container, I suppose, in those scenarios, you know, let's have those conversations around how we're going to be outside of coaching as well. So we're very clear of those boundaries. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I'm sort of reminded of a phrase that I learned when I was an internal coach, which was that whole thing around, you know, if you're talking to somebody else and you think that I may have said something as your coach to them, you know, it's more that you've probably said something that's generated a thought in them. It wouldn't be anything that I've said, because what we discuss will remain confidential, you know. So if that happens, please come and talk to me. But there is that sort of sense around, especially if there are other people around that are sort of work relationships that are very close to both of you. I think it's really important that, you know, that thing what you said about protecting the container is so important.
And you know, my sense is that what you're talking about there is during the coaching relationship and
Mm,
actually after the coaching
mm,
relationship, it's really important to have a conversation as the coaching ends.
mm, mm.
How will we be if we meet in the corridor? What
Yeah.
is our, you know, because you now don't have a contract, and
Mm,
sometimes what I've noticed is that clients will, you know, without any sort of unuseful attention. You know, it'll just be a natural kind of a process that they'll say, "Oh, could I talk to you about, you know, X? I'm having this problem." But
mm,
actually, you no longer have a
mm.
coaching contract, and
Yeah.
so it's important at the end of the relationship um, to check how are we going to be and
Mm,
sometimes I say to you know, I find the coaches are kind of saying, well, look, I'll just keep my door open, and if the person wants to come back, we'll have a chat about it. And I say to them, you know, the idea of being a coach is that we make ourselves redundant as
yeah.
quickly as we can, so that the person is empowered to almost like they take us in their head and they ask themselves the
Mm,
coaching questions we would have been asking.
mm,
So there isn't a dependency building up. And
mm.
also that, you know, if somebody is, some people find it difficult to say goodbye and to kind of end
Yeah.
things. So you have to ask yourself, if I'm holding on to my client, who is that for and what is that for? And
Mm,
likewise, if a client seems to be clinging on, then, you know, how am I serving them if I allow that to happen?
mm. Yeah, no, really, really lovely points in terms of, I suppose, because it can even be, um, I suppose, less clear. You know, the coachee can say, "Could I meet for a coffee?" You know, and before you know it, they're expecting to be coached. So yes, how do we hold this space so it's very clear that when we come to an end, you know, how the coachee is going to support themselves going forward, and like you say, the coach becomes redundant. Um, I'm mindful of time, Monica. I know we've got
Mm.
about 10 minutes left, and I appreciate we've been sort of you mentioned virtual coaching earlier, and I know for, you know, our program, we're very sort of conscious of training coaches to work face to face and virtually. And for a lot of coaches, you know, working virtually, there's an assumption that the contact won't be the same. You know, I can't do the same things. What would you say about the container, that's different in terms of virtual work? So that could be, you know, Skype, it could be even the phone. What thought have
Mm.
you got around that?
Well, I've been working for so long with both that I
Mm,
don't actually experience any difference. And, you
mm,
know, as you know by now, with me and energy, I believe energy travels. We don't, there is no separation. As human beings, we can connect instantly through our limbic system.
Mm.
And so I think it's some of the same kind of principles apply in that you prepare yourself to be in a good space. You make sure that the space you're in won't be disturbed. Just to give you an example, this morning there were building work suddenly started in the building next door, and I thought the roof was going to come in here. So I ran out and I bought myself this set of headsets so that I would be able to contain the space.
Mm.
And I also checked with the builders. So, there is a piece of work to be done when you're working virtually, or if it's by phone, you may not see the person, but actually your state is still important and their state is still important.
Mm.
And to check with them, sometimes people come on supervision calls and I check with them if they are in a good place and if they can speak. Because if they're kind of sitting in a car or sitting in a place where people are going to be disturbing them, that's not going to be the best space for them to work in.
Yep.
So to really take care of the space, and sometimes it's just people aren't aware.
Mm-mm.
So, to support them, to support themselves to create a good space.
Mm.
The other thing, I think I might have mentioned this before, sometimes when people are at home, there might be children, dogs, cats, or, other animals. And one of the things I've noticed is that when you stay very calm and you include, you kind of almost give the animal a subconscious message that they are welcome, they actually lie down and become very still. And the same has happened with children. So what's one of the things I believe is acknowledge and include, and that calms things.
Mm.
And I suppose the other thing is I've worked as supervisor with coaches who've been, they've been used to face, they've been kind of nervous or anxious about starting virtual work. And what I say to them is, your presence will be the same if you prepare yourself. And maybe if you're working on phone, you won't have access to all of the cues. You won't see the face or the body language. But other aspects of for example, your hearing will become more acute. You'll become more aware of their breath. So, once you work with your own energy and invite them into a place where they're well held and where they're looking after their own space, then trust that it actually is virtually the same quality. Your presence will be the same.
Mm.
And the calmer you are about it, the more that will be true.
Mm. I agree. And I think something that I'm reminded of that I know that you do, Monica, at the start of your virtual sessions is just that contracting around the fact that we are working virtually. So, if for some reason we lose contact with each other, there's that sense of we will reconnect, whether that's, by Skype still or by phone, there are other mediums. So if that happens, it's fine. Just rejoin the call.
Absolutely. Because I think what it does is it brings a sense of kind of calm and peacefulness that even if, whether it's Skype or Zoom, even if it freezes or even if it breaks down, that I still hold the space. Energetically, I'm kind of thinking of holding a container and I still feel connected to the person. And, sometimes one of the things I've come to believe, which some people might find a bit strange, but it's borne out of my experience, that sometimes what happens on Skype or Zoom is mirroring what's going on systemically in the person's life or work. Because some years ago, I was having a session with a lady in France, and I noticed that there was a storm outside my window and Skype was very kind of iffy. And I just said to her, wow, there's a storm going on today and it feels like, we're disconnecting and connecting. I said, has that any resonance for you? And she burst into tears and she said, that's what my work feels like at the moment. And she
Yeah.
went on to explain, what that meant.
Mm.
So I've become very trusting about, the systemic influences that
Mm.
come into our work as well. So
Mm.
I'm not afraid. I think I invite people to be calm and to be curious.
Mm. And there's some of the themes that we'll be exploring over the course of the training, and that sort of invitation to bring in that sort of mindset of no coincidences as well.
Mm.
Um, and I just wanted to as well share that something that I really learned that helped me when I first started working with people in terms of that creating that initial contact with somebody, if we're working by phone, was to spend some time, you know, sort of explaining where I was and describing where I was sitting,
Mm.
and asking the clients to do the same. So where are you now? What can you see? What's going on around you? Just so there's that sort of sense of, I suppose, of physical contact as well, even though I can't see them. And I just found that sort of created a different connection with the other person as we went into the call. Mm.
Absolutely, because it allows you to get almost a visual sense of the person, and sometimes I will kind of lift up my laptop and show the person outside the window,
Mm.
because some people see the picture on my Skype, and I live by the sea, so
Mm.
I don't know if they actually believe that I live there, so I show them outside the window, or um, yeah, because people like to get a sense of locating you and locating themselves. It's all
Mm.
about the relationship.
Mm. Mm. And so, Monica, I've got a couple of minutes left. I suppose my final question would always be, for people that are new to coaching, if there's one key piece of advice you would give them around, creating a container for good work, what would be the advice?
Hmm. Just going to take a moment and
Mm.
kind of connect with myself, just to,
Mm.
rather than jump into my head.
Mm.
My sense is the container is a living thing. It's the relationship, it's the quality of connection, and to be really aware of connecting with the person, making sure you build the relationship and building permissions, for example, about the whatever challenge, or
Mm.
whatever it is that's going to allow it to work. And I talk a lot about partnership. So
Mm.
build a relationship that's based on partnership,
Mm.
and that you can contract and come back to people and ask them what else they need, and check regularly on the
Mm.
quality of the container together, not just
Mm.
the coach holding it, but also that the client can come in and say, actually, when you said that, I noticed this in myself. So
Mm.
that both can have a conversation. It's not just one person.
Mm.
Um, and that the container, like the contracting, is is part of the ongoing inquiry between the two, that it's a
Mm.
growing dynamic space.
Mm. Thank you, and I think that that whole idea around this really enables there to be a partnership. We're partnering the client, we're partnering the coachee, rather than we're doing coaching. We're taking the client on a journey. There's something about that co-creation, that essence you've just touched on there, that I think is so vital in terms of the outcome of this idea of the crucible that we're holding for change, actually.
Mm.
Um, so thank you for your time, Monica. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this, well, in this session. I hope there will be additional sessions that we're going to be running around other areas that are really you're passionate about in terms of self-care, etc. as
Mm.
coaches. Just for the people listening, at the bottom of the screen you can see the web address in terms of Catalyst 14. If you connect to the resources page on the website, you'll find our program of webinars that are going to be running for this year. I really hope you can dial into the live sessions that we will be running. It's our way of giving something back in terms of these free sessions that we run. It's a way of us continuing to connect with you, and that sort of partnership on your journey as you sort of move into and continue in your profession as a coach. So really look forward to seeing you again and connecting with you in the future. So I really hope you've enjoyed the session. I hope you've taken some value from this, and yeah, we're connect again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And